Have you ever noticed how often the person in charge is precisely the one who shouldn't be? The supervisor whose incompetence is matched only by their confidence. The political leader whose self-interest eclipses any vision for the common good. The family patriarch whose need for control masquerades as protection. It's as if power itself possesses a cruel sense of irony, gravitating toward those least equipped to wield it wisely. Tonight, in this shared darkness, I want to explore a disturbing pattern that shapes our families, our workplaces, our governments, and even our most intimate relationships. The way power so often attracts precisely the wrong people, and what that reveals about human nature itself. Nearly 5 centuries ago, Niccolò Machiavelli peered into this darkness with unflinching clarity. What he found there continues to haunt us today. It is much safer to be feared than loved, Machiavelli wrote in The Prince, his notorious manual for rulers. This single sentence cuts to the heart of our dilemma, not just in politics, but in every human sphere where power operates. Think about the people in your life who have sought positions of authority, the colleague who campaigned relentlessly for promotion, the family member who insists on controlling every holiday gathering, the friend who subtly dominates every group dynamic. Now, ask yourself, what drives this hunger? What need pulses beneath the surface of ambition? Machiavelli understood something profound about human psychology, something we often recognize but rarely name. Those most attracted to power are frequently those driven by the deepest wounds. The child who felt powerless in an unstable home grows into the adult determined never to feel vulnerable again. The person whose worth was questioned becomes obsessed with acquiring symbols of status and authority. The one who feared chaos creates rigid systems of control. In other words, the pursuit of power often begins not as a noble calling to service, but as an unconscious strategy to heal ancient injuries. This isn't true in every case, of course. Some are called to leadership by genuine vision, by authentic desire to serve something larger than themselves. But Machiavelli's dark insight remains. Power has a magnetic pull on the wounded psyche precisely because it promises to salve what hurts most. Men are so simple of mind and so much dominated by their immediate needs that a deceitful man will always find plenty who are ready to be deceived, Machiavelli observed. Perhaps the greatest deception is the one we practice on ourselves, the belief that acquiring control over others will somehow heal our own sense of inner powerlessness. But Machiavelli's insights run deeper still. It's not just that the wrong people are often attracted to power, it's that power itself transforms those who hold it, often in ways they neither intend nor recognize. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, wrote Lord Acton centuries after Machiavelli. But the corruption he spoke of isn't simply the obvious kind, the blatant abuses, the naked self-interest. It's something more subtle and perhaps more tragic, the gradual warping of perception itself. Studies in psychology have repeatedly confirmed what Machiavelli observed through his political acumen. Power changes how we see others and ourselves. It diminishes empathy. It heightens self-focus. It creates the illusion of exceptional entitlement. Think about how quickly someone's behavior can change when they're placed in even a small position of authority. The colleague promoted to management who suddenly talks over those who were once peers. The volunteer board member who becomes increasingly dictatorial. The parent who justifies control with "because I said so." This transformation doesn't necessarily reflect someone's true character finally emerging. Rather, it demonstrates how power itself rewires our neural circuitry, how it subtly convinces us that the normal rules of human consideration no longer apply. Machiavelli understood this corrupting influence not as a moral failure, but as an almost inevitable consequence of human nature meeting positional authority. How we live is so different from how we ought to live that he who studies what ought to be done rather than what is done will learn the way to his downfall rather than to his preservation. In other words, power reveals something essential about who we are, and often it's not what we believed about ourselves. But there's a third layer to Machiavelli's dark truth, one that extends beyond individual psychology into the systems we create and perpetuate. Not only does power attract the wrong people and corrupt those who hold it, but our systems of power selection actively favor those least suited to wield authority wisely. Consider what traits help someone acquire power in most hierarchical systems. Assertiveness that borders on aggression, self-promotion, willingness to engage in strategic alliance building, comfort with competition, ability to project unwavering confidence regardless of actual competence. Now consider what traits make someone most likely to use power well. Empathy, self-awareness, humility, willingness to listen to dissenting viewpoints, comfort with complexity and nuance. The painful irony, these second sets of traits, the ones most essential for the wise use of power, often disadvantage those who possess them in the competition to acquire power in the first place. This creates what we might call Machiavelli's trap. Those most likely to obtain positions of authority are often precisely those least equipped to exercise that authority for the common good. We see this in our political systems, where the qualities that win elections are not the same qualities needed for effective governance. We see it in our corporations, where the path to the C-suite often rewards behaviors that damage organizational health. We see it in religious institutions, academic departments, nonprofit organizations, anywhere humans gather in hierarchical structures. And perhaps, most painfully, we see it in our families, where those who seize control are often driven by the deepest wounds, perpetuating cycles of dysfunction across generations. So where does this leave us if Machiavelli's dark truth about power is accurate? If it does indeed attract the wrong people, corrupt those who hold it, and operate through systems that select for the worst traits, what hope do we have? The first step is one Machiavelli himself would recognize: seeing reality clearly without the comfort of illusions. This means acknowledging our own relationship with power, both in how we respond to authority figures and in how we exercise whatever authority we possess. It means recognizing the wounded parts of ourselves that may be drawn to control, dominance, or the false security of hierarchy. Most importantly, it means understanding that power itself is neither inherently good nor inherently evil. It's a force, like fire or water, that can create or destroy, depending on how it's channeled. The psychologist Carl Jung observed that Where power predominates, love is lacking. Perhaps this points toward an alternative, not the rejection of power itself, but the grounding of power in something deeper than the need to control. What might it look like to hold power as a form of service rather than dominance, to recognize authority as responsibility rather than privilege, to understand leadership not as elevation above others, but as cultivation of others' capacities? These aren't merely idealistic questions. They point toward practical alternatives to Machiavelli's dark vision, alternatives we can embody in our families, our workplaces, our communities. Consider the parent who gradually transfers authority to their growing child, teaching the responsible use of power rather than modeling its exploitation. The manager who measures success not by personal advancement, but by the development of their team. The community leader who uses their position to amplify marginalized voices rather than silence them. These examples suggest that while Machiavelli may have correctly diagnosed the pathology of power, he need not have the final word on its potential. Perhaps the greatest value in Machiavelli's dark truth is not the cynicism it might engender, but the awareness it can awaken. By recognizing how power attracts the wrong people, we become more discerning about those we elevate to positions of authority, looking beyond charisma, confidence, and credentials to character. By understanding how power corrupts, we can build systems of accountability that mitigate its distorting effects, not just through external checks and balances, but through practices that cultivate self-awareness in those who lead. By acknowledging the structural problems in our power selection systems, we can design alternatives that identify and develop the qualities most essential for the wise stewardship of authority. Most importantly, by confronting our own complex relationship with power, the wounds that draw us toward control, the fear that makes submission seem safer than autonomy, we reclaim choice where before there was only unconscious compulsion. Machiavelli's gift to us, paradoxically, is the opportunity to prove him wrong, not by denying the darkness he identified, but by bringing it into the light of conscious awareness, where transformation becomes possible. Tonight, as you consider the relationships with power that shape your life, I invite you to look with compassion and clarity at both sides of this dynamic, the power you hold and the power others hold over you. Where have you seen Machiavelli's dark truth confirmed? Where have you witnessed its transcendence? What would it mean to relate to power not from wound but from wholeness, not from fear but from love? These questions have no simple answers, but in their honest consideration lies the possibility of a different relationship with authority, one that neither naively trusts nor cynically dismisses, but engages with full awareness of both the shadow and the light in our human capacity for power. If these reflections resonate with your own experience of power, whether in family dynamics, workplace relationships, or broader social structures, I invite you to share your insights in the comments below. Your perspective may illuminate aspects of this complex territory that others need to see. And if you value explorations that bring light to the shadows of our shared human experience, consider subscribing to A Voice in the Darkness. Each week, we venture together into the territories often left unexamined, finding there not just challenge, but possibility. next time, may you recognize the power you hold, use it with wisdom and compassion, and remain mindful of Machiavelli's dark truth, not to despair of human nature, but to transform it.